Michael. This is Beard Banter. I'm on episode 33. If you count the, 4 or 5 beard shaving banter episodes that, may or may not have been part of part of Beard Banter, but they're in there anyway. So Beard Banter episode 33. I'm here with Michael Burchill, and we're going to talk about verified credentials and what that means and what that is. So Michael, why don't you introduce yourself? If you're in the audience, please go ahead and chat and interact. We're gonna make this a fun session. So Michael, introduce yourself for me, please.
So yeah, I'm Michael Burchill. I'm the VP of Identity or Director of Identity for Credivera. I've got a background in identity and access management going back to about 2003, where I was at Hitachi Identity Management. I've worked with ForgeRock. I've worked with Oracle. I've worked with some companies that aren't even around anymore, like Sun Microsystems.
There,
Um,
you're dating yourself a bit, Michael,
yeah,
on that
yeah.
particular
Uh,
statement.
I want to apologize in advance. We had a set of headphones on me earlier, and it didn't work out. So now I have headphone hair. So it
Me too.
makes me
That's
look
right.
younger. So that's
Right
good.
there, I'm having a challenge with the headphones.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, now we're at Credivera. We're taking a big leap forward with verifiable credentials, and that's what I'm doing now.
okay, so that's the point I think that I'd like to get across today is what is a verified credential? Microsoft has their piece through Intra that was this verifiable creds to some extent, and then you guys have the same thing. What is that? What does it mean? Why does it matter?
So first off, it's verifiable credential. Verified credential means it's already been verified.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
right? So the verifiable credential, the essence and the reason that little semantic difference matters is a verifiable credential, and you could also use the term verifiable document, is a document that anybody in the world can verify the source of. So if I give you a document, you can you can trace it back to me or my digital identity and verify that that document did in fact come from me. And that's important because we've created a society where so many electronic documents exchange hands, and it's very easy to fake them, right?
sure.
And one of the best ways to fake a document is to say it's coming from somebody it's not, right? There's tons of misquotes. There's supply chain issues where people send in invoices for companies that you're not even really doing business with. So you can now, using verifiable credentials, anybody can receive that document and trace it back to its originating source.
Yeah. And the technology in that, there's a couple of different technologies, as I understand, of that verifiability, right? I believe one of them is somewhat DNS related,
Yeah.
and then another one of them is blockchain. It rides on traditional blockchain. Help me understand what goes into a verifiable credential. And I kind of want, real quick before we do that, I want to talk about what I think the challenge this solves is. You've got a populace that is struggling with a couple of problems: security, right, vis-a-vis identity fraud in general around those things,
Yeah.
but also in the same way privacy, in the sense that people are forced to share documents all the time, share information all the time that someone then holds and owns, as opposed to having some reference back to a master document that then is verifiable, right? And so, is that kind of the problem statement that this helps to try to solve?
Oh yeah, like that is those are two of the problem statements. The truth is, verifiable documents, they solve a lot of problem statements, but the two that you just outlined are two of the most pressing ones right now. And the idea that the second one, the user privacy one, is a huge one. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't really understate that, and people, they don't grasp it. But right now, you're dealing with, I'll use a couple of companies, and I'll try to include as many as possible so that I don't make anyone in particular look like the villain. The truth is, they're all doing it out of necessity, right? So Facebook takes your data, Google takes your data, Apple takes your data, Microsoft takes your data, Amazon takes your data, and they do it to try to give you a better experience, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, Yeah, well, the problem is though that your data is now in the hands of like these huge data warehouses, and those data warehouses are maintained by people, right? And security in any regard, physical security or digital security, is only as strong as its weakest link, right? And with a verifiable credential, you hold the data, and say Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, they only verify the credential. So they're just saying, yeah, this is you, because there's no way this can't be you. This credential is what it is, right? Um, it's sort of locked in stone. So they only need to contain the reference now to that credential. And if they want to see your personal data, they can always just get it from the credential with your consent.
Right.
And they can look
And
at,
that's the key part, right?
yeah,
It's the consent upon consumption aspect of this that's so important, as I understand it.
yeah. That's a huge thing, right? Like, if Google wants to share it with one of their vendors, they have to get your consent. And it's not just a tacit consent like today, where you go in and you say, "Oh yeah, I consent. I consent. Go ahead." And then they share data that they have stored with their vendor,
Yeah.
right? Because yeah, that's nice of them to ask for your consent, but do you really know?
Yeah.
But with a verifiable credential, it comes back to your wallet, wherever that wallet is, and it says, Google would like to share your data. Do you consent? And at
Right.
that time, you actually send it, right? They don't have it.
And or no, right? And if you click no, my gut says they get an empty request.
Yeah,
Is
they
that a
do.
fair statement? Yeah.
Yeah, they get an empty request, and in your wallet, you have as part of the standard, you can look up these standards. The standards are defined by the W3C, and there's a few other standards organizations working on
Help
this as
people
well.
understand. On my show, if we use an acronym, I
Oh,
need it explained. So, what's the W3C?
the W3C stands for the World Wide Web Consortium,
Right.
and
Awesome.
it is the people who define the HTTP standard. And I don't know, I'm dating myself, but last time I was really involved with the W3C, um, there was a lot of big beards, and they were very gray.
Fair.
Like, and there's a few other. There's the new one started by the Linux Foundation for the Open Wallet.
Yep.
You know, and these they're defining the standards. But essentially, if you have a wallet and you've shared it, you can just look and see a record of everybody that you've shared this credential with as well. So
Yeah.
you're very much in control of your identity with this technology.
And if you look at it, Microsoft is also leaning into this technology. For anybody that's listening, they calling it verifiable credentials in theirs, or do they call it verified credentials? I think they call it verified credentials in their
They're
nomenclature.
calling it Entra Verified ID.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so what that does is that's a piece that can be involved in this, I would wager, right? You can tie that in to their wallet to bring that to a user's end wallet with this. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Microsoft really is the first one to the party with an actual product
Okay,
that facilitates this. So Credivera, we're doing our thing, and we're tying into the Entra platform.
gotcha.
And the Entra platform allows us to resolve and handle these verifiable credentials. And yeah, it's uh,
Tate says wisdom drains pigment from beards. That's all, Michael Burchill. So that's great because I'm gonna get more of these gray ones. And for those of you that don't know, that are watching here, I shaved my beard November 12th for $202,667 in charity. And so it used to be much longer, but not as gray, and it's coming back more gray. So maybe I'm actually getting smarter. That's a good conversation starter. I'm assuming you know Tate, Michael.
I actually don't. I don't know
Oh,
Tate,
okay.
but I'm looking at the image and I can see a significant beard. So
Yeah. So maybe it's somewhat self-serving by its own wisdom discussion potentially, but love it. Thanks for being here, Tate.
yeah,
Appreciate you.
I mean that sort of plays into the old saying in the computer world that a successful programming language is always tied to an individual with a huge beard.
Fair. So back to the verified credentials, and or verifiable credentials in this nomenclature. I first ran across them, and to your point, and I want to make this a little less ephemeral for people watching and listening, is that I'm able to sign into my Microsoft Authenticator, and there is a new page that says verifiable credential or verified credentials from Intra. And what they did was when I went to an engineering airlift, Microsoft gave me an identity for that.
Hmm.
And every time that identity was touched, checked in by the gate person, when I walked in and had a badge scan, every piece of that was touched was immutable to some extent, right? It was all in that quote unquote wallet where I can see each touch, I can see each piece. I have to approve the request. I have to say yes, I'm willing to share this credential with you, and so it's a really neat thing. And I think what's really cool, and Elena asked a very good question of saying, why does that matter to people? Why is this something that should be thought about? And it's because of the extensibility. But maybe Michael, I'll let you touch it. But my thought would be Microsoft having that capacitance and buying in on this means that as others bolt in and as others use these things as extensibility, you're going to have a high mass adoption capability, right? That would be my initial thought is with Microsoft being involved. And they're doing some projects I can't talk about that are really cool with those intro credentials coming up soon. So what's your take on Elena's question?
So, from my perspective, and I will preface this by saying that, as I said when I came online here, the majority of my career has been spent with not Microsoft, right?
Sure.
So, I'm not here to sell Microsoft. I am here to simply say that in the verifiable credentials community, and with any standards based thing,
Sure.
there's a lot of debating about standards.
I've been in the room. I
Yeah,
know.
and not a lot of code getting written. And
Right.
Microsoft has actually gone ahead and built something that works,
Yep.
and it's based on open standards, and it's available now, and it works well, and I can't fault it, so I'm going to use it. It's a good product.
Now, you guys were involved in a really cool project in Canada. I don't know if are we allowed to talk about that? Because this would help give context of what this could do from a verifiable credential.
I think so. Yeah,
Okay, we'll
I
see.
won't
We're
use specific
maybe
names,
releasing
but yeah.
here. Sure, sure. But let's help people understand, and then we'll get back to what are the underlying protocols for those nerds in the crowd. But when we're talking about real world application of something like a verifiable document, this is the use case, right? At least one of them.
Oh
And
yeah.
so let's talk about that. What did you guys do in that couple year project towards taking these open standards, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and applying them to real world humans that need to use these things?
So what we did at a high level is we were able to basically create an asset and basically assign an inspector to that asset and get that asset across the border and have the paper trail completely done through verifiable credentials. Now, what that means is at the end of the asset trail, so at its destination, somebody was able to view uh, a verifiable document that had basically the information regarding where the asset was produced, how it
And
was
you're talking about a physical asset,
a
a
physical asset.
shippable item, let's call
Yeah,
it, right? Or
yeah, yeah.
something you
Let's
might want to transport.
Since we're in Canada, let's call it, like wood. We're
Okay, fair,
shipping wood across the border.
fair.
So the bunch of wood uh, goes goes onto a truck. It gets inspected by an inspector. It travels to the border. They need to view the inspection documents, the bill of lading, all that stuff, and
Yep,
then it
great.
goes across the border and it ends up in a warehouse where they view the border security stuff. They want to know about the quality of the lumber, and they want to make sure that the inspector who did the inspection was employed by somebody who was legally allowed to do that inspection,
Now
and that
that's
inspect
the crux of it, right?
yeah.
Because now, as part of that chain, what you're doing is saying, I'm Matt Lee, and I'm wood inspector. Gosh, that may never live it down. I
I
may,
know.
I may have screwed up there, bud. You may have set me up.
I did.
But I'm inspecting wood for a living, and I've gone to wood inspection school, and I've learned how to inspect wood the best, right?
Yep.
And I've been approved by the great Canadian government, and they issue me a wood inspector license, right?
Exactly.
So I'm now a wood inspector, but that license is tied to the digital me
Hmm.
that has my ability to sign that inspection document and now
Yes.
also verify that the government had given me a wood inspector license, right? All in that
Yes.
one package. And that's
Yes.
kind of the vision, right?
Yep. And that way, I mean, when you look at it logistically, um, it saves so much paperwork. It actually really helps things get across the border.
Yep.
A great example that plays into everyday life here in Canada now is Canada. We legalized cannabis, right?
Sure. I'm not aware of that personally, but I'm glad to hear. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Cannabis is legalized up here in Canada, and it's still very, very illegal to take it across the federal border into the U.S.,
Sure.
which creates a real drug testing burden for truckers going across the border, right? So these, things like drug testing done with a verifiable credential, which cannot be faked.
Altered. Yeah.
Yeah, uh, it adds expediency because you're
A-
going to be doing a lot of those tests.
And you could even see a world where in a process, let's go back to our wood inspection process, right?
I'm going to
But
get you a
in
T-shirt.
it's going to be, Matt Lee certified verifiable wood inspector. That's what it's
Yes.
going to say. It's going to be great. That'll be fun at a bar. But as you think about that process, normally what you would have is I would write a document, I would sign it, I would hand it to the trucker. Trucker drives it across the border. Receiving side security team or inspection team or whatever it may be says, let's verify that happens. They read the document, they make sure the signature matches. They really don't have a great way to prove it wasn't an altered or faked document usually. But
Sure.
additionally, they have to inspect it. You could see a world where because there's a verifiable credential that was only issued in this type of format, without even reading the document potentially, you might have the assertion that it was done.
Yeah.
So you could create more privacy even, I'm being a little hyperbolous, but by doing that, nobody sees the document. They're just getting that it's been validated and it can only be this document if this guy signed it and he was valid,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
The existence of the document is, you know, a very, very, very good litmus test. It's the
Exactly.
it's the very first test, and you get to trust them, right? And the reason you trust them is that it does trace back. So that institution that was certified by the government gave a license to this individual.
Right.
And as we all know in the identity and access management world, is compliance rolls uphill. So,
Okay, define that. Help people understand that term if they're just starting their understanding of compliance.
okay, so in a compliance environment, if I own the company that gave a license to this person, and that person's license contained false information, it's my fault as the company, right? It's
Gotcha.
not just the person who lied. It's my fault for not checking. And
Gotcha.
now with
It's a due
verifiable,
care or due diligence challenge, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
being proved. Yeah.
absolutely. Like, and so with a verifiable credential, basically all parts of that chain are accountable, right? Because
Yeah.
they can't lie and say, I didn't issue that.
Right. We can prove it.
Yep.
Yeah. And let's talk about that tech, right? We've got a bunch of time left still, but let's dig a little bit into that. What's underlying that? I think if I understand it, it's a two protocols. It's DID ION or DID-ION and DID Web. What does
Hmm.
DID stand for? Michael, help me
DID
understand
stands
that.
for decentralized identity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's protocols to either use the existence of a DNS record and host or a blockchain record that's being paid for and running on, I think, Bitcoin, as I understand it, on that standard, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so those are the two protocols. Help people understand a little bit about how that works. Maybe don't go so deep into the tech unless you just want to. But how does it work? What works on Did Web? Let's start with.
Well, so it kind of works the same on both.
Okay.
Did web is the easiest one to explain because given our current environment with tech, people have a lot of familiarity with certificates already.
Okay.
So with a did web document, um, you create this document, and it's just a JSON file. that you place on a website, on a URL, and part of that did document is a key, and the location of where you put it is part of the input into the key. So if you move that document, the key no longer matches where it is, nothing will resolve against it. So
Gotcha.
you can't move that document. You could upgrade the server.
You
There's
can
no,
move the infrastructure,
yeah,
yeah, but
but it
not,
still
yeah,
has to
yeah,
be in the same place.
right.
So essentially, if I have a wallet or something like that, there are services out there, and you could just do it with plain DNS. But there are services out there called universal resolvers that you can put in that DID identifier, which is contained in the DID document, and it's basically, it says the DID format, so it says DID colon web, and then colon and your URL, right? And it'll basically resolve that and say, yes, okay, I can resolve this DID, and then it will take the document that you're trying to, and this is the verification part. This will take the document that you're looking at, and it will say, does this key match up with this key? And if it does, it'll say, good, the DID resolves, the document is verified. And once again, there are some mandatory fields in the DID standard
Okay.
or in the VC standard that say, expiration date, things like that are sort of baked into the format.
Does there have to be an expiration date of X, or can it be, would you have to set it 100 years in the future to set a number, or can it be set as unlimited to some extent?
Yeah, you could basically set an indefinite. Last time I checked the VC data spec, I think expiration date was optional,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it is in the spec. And issuance date is non-optional. So things
Yeah.
like issuance date have to be there. Um,
Why would somebody care about issuance date of a document, Michael? Explain it like I'm five. Why does that matter?
because the verification is a point in time, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, right. So that inspection. Okay, so what really matters from a legal perspective? I mean, our the wood inspector, Matt,
Thank you,
could have
Captain Wood
gone
Inspector, to you.
could have gone out to like could have gone out to like party in northern BC where lumber is the main business and wood inspectors are highly respected,
Sure.
and he could have received some like free stuff, and as a result lost his wood inspection license,
Sure.
for giving people preferential treatment.
Free wood. Right.
Yeah, free wood. It's a thing. And the problem with that is he would lose his license.
Sure.
But at the time that he did that inspection, he was a fully licensed wood inspector, and that's all that
Exactly.
matters.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so cool about these protocols is because time and date stamps are so critical and part of this. You can really tell a story, right? And you can prove, no, 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 Matt got free wood the day after he inspected this wood,
Yep.
right? And
Yeah.
so he was valid in his capacitance, and you could see that playing out in doctors. You could see that playing out in any type of licensed space, licensed financial practitioners, right? Did the underlying broker dealer actually term Matt when the SEC or FINRA said he was no longer viable as a broker dealer? Those are things that all come into play of like where that time chain needs to be proven. And what's
Yeah.
really neat about these type of protocols is they are by their nature stamped, right? That's kind of the point is you have each of those pieces as part of the protocol.
Yeah.
Um, very cool. So one of the other things I see in my mind that's a challenge to getting this off the ground, because what I know you won't want to get into this, but I also feel one of the biggest gaps in technology is that I can be anybody I want to be on the web. I can be Michael. I
Hmm.
can be Elena. I can be anybody I want to be. And there can be lots of Elenas and there can be lots of Michaels. And they could all be fake Michaels or fake Matts or fake whatever. I could be a fake wood inspector. And so when you get into that, these type
No.
of I know, it's hard to believe.
No.
But these kind of things I think tie back into actually tying an identity to the web and actually
Hmm.
tying an identity to certain very critical functions when it comes to the technology we use in these intermodal systems, right? And I'll describe it for you. If let's say I'm a MSP and I am issuing a set of documents or credentials of things they've been allowed to do because they've gone through certain training or they've gone through certain things, I could set those guidelines at the identity level and have almost immutable history of when the training happens, when it was verified, and then I could then, as another third party, enrich that data. Right,
Yeah.
I could be a third party trainer that's going to assert those things. I could be a third party VAR, or I'm sorry, or a system creator, or ISV, or something that's doing these things. And what's great about it is anybody can host pieces and enrich data that can be then assigned to an ID and then used by that ID and shared by that identity, right?
Yeah.
So, is that a fair way of kind of saying what's possible by this?
Oh, it is very possible, and one caveat I would like to put on that is because it's a very hot topic right now. People's identities,
Yeah,
identities are getting stolen. Identities do this. Like identity is everywhere right now, and so this can be as much identity and as little identity as you want,
that's fair.
right? Like there's that big. This identity could be tied to your job, right?
Okay,
So
so
you
it could
can
be
go.
ephemeral if I
Yeah.
left that job, right? To some extent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, if you're worried about privacy, and a lot of people are, and they should be, and a lot of people are worried about, institutions having too much control over your identity. This is actually a way to take some of that control back. It's not, this is not a scary thing. This is very good, because that identity that you're proposing, I could have my work identity, I could have my personal identity, I could have my identity with a club that I'm a member of, right? And those all are, they could be traced back to individual decentralized identifiers, which are islands on the internet. They can be verified back to that.
And the only connector is the wallet,
Yeah.
right? Is the ultimate aspect of that, if I'm
Yep.
correct. Yeah, and that is private by its very nature, right? You
Yep.
own the wallet, and you
You
hold
only
it,
share
and
what
then
you want.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and so that's a great call out because it does say, yes, we might have many mats, but they're all different contextual aspects of mat. They're different verifiable islands, if you will, from my Kmart membership, and maybe potentially my identity for wood inspection at the wood inspector
Yeah.
company, as it goes. So, yeah, it's a fun conversation. I think one of the challenges I see is we're on the very beginning end of that, right? We're at this very early stage of adoption of a standard, using it to do these types of things. And I think what you guys have created, and I've played around with some of the mock-ups and what you're doing, create a very nice ecosystem for that, right? Where it makes it very easy for someone to have their own verifiability. And that could be at the drug testing lab that's testing these truckers that says, yep, they are good and clean without sharing PHI,
Yep.
without sharing PII, right? Now you're just sharing assertion.
Yes.
Now you're just sharing that that person was that person when they did this, according to the identity I needed for this right now, right? They walk into the testing center, they verify their cred, they test. It's tied to that cred. You can show when they walked in the testing center. You can show when it was verified, but you could only share potentially that it was right
Yep.
and that it was done and they issued it. If that
That's
makes
that's a
sense.
big thing. Is yeah, you're only sharing the verification. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why this ties so much into privacy. So I hope that demystifies a little bit of this for people in the sense that this is talking about like giving cryptographic ways, whether it be did web or did ion, to prove that this happened as a moment in time and not overshare. You could actually craft it in a way that you are very limitedly sharing what information, and you would simply tie that ID and credential to that employer to be consumed in the same fashion, where they don't have to hold those documents. They don't have a copy of your PHI with your medical information, your date of birth, all the stuff on the top of it, and your test results. They just have yes or no. It was good. This human is good to continue working. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's all that is the key. It's that if you want to if I'm going into a bar and they want to know I'm of age,
Sure.
they can ask the question, is this person of age? And they get the response of yes or no, but they don't get
Exactly.
my home address. They don't get to see all my personal info.
Whereas right
Not that,
now, you hand some bloke a copy of your driver's license. He does a scanny thing that goes in potentially if it's a club that does check those things, which I'm not sure why I got carded, but it's exposing that business to risk, right? If they're holding copies of this data or if they're doing anything to prove they checked in the normal fashion, they actually are putting themselves in risk. They're holding more data than they need. They've exceeded their principle of least privilege on this data.
yep,
And so I think with this type of assertion, you can just simply is 21 check share is 21 right
yeah,
in that case. And there's a lot of those use cases. You could even see the governments having those centralized identities. Like in the US, we have ID.me. In Canada, you guys have your own system of this. But you could even see the government trying to tie back and create this document that they issue that has all this data fields in it, right? Date of birth, motorcycle license, yes or no. Do they have these things? And you could see that being able to be used when maybe necessary for certain parties at varying degrees of data request,
Hmm.
right? You could have the police, when you get pulled over, go, I want to see your cred, and they're going to ask for all of it, right? But maybe potentially at the bar, it's only is 21 being asked, right? That question about the data itself. And so you could see where you could structure a way to have way less risk as a business by simply engaging this process of sharing through assertion, right?
Hmm.
It's kind of that conversation is the way I'd frame it. And so we do have a conversation. Says same with a traffic stop. Maybe you've just touched on what I just said. The officer doesn't need to see your home address, only class a vehicle out. Exactly, right?
Yep.
That's a fantastic point. And I'm going to try this. Trajano Reyes Osorio de Barros. Barros. Maybe I screwed that up. And if I did, I'm so very sorry, but I'm trying hard. Trying hard. But yeah, absolutely correct, right? You think of this as when that officer pulls you over, it needs is valid license, yes, no, and that could be traced all the way back to the government, right? The government could say no, this is not valid license anymore, and they would only find out normally when they run the license in their system.
Think about it this way, and this blew my mind. This would be, I wish this existed when I was going to school. Imagine you could get Chat GPT to write your entire, like,
I knew that son of a gun was going to show up in this
yeah, yeah.
conversation.
But think about it this way. Think about it this way. If you could tell it to only use verified sources,
Ooh,
and
oh
then,
hell,
yeah,
it
and
just
then you've
clicked.
got then you've got like no
Oh,
mistakes in your paper.
no, that's not the problem. Then you've got nobody manipulating the underlying data in that space, right?
Yeah,
To use ChatGPT more maliciously. If you could make those verifiable and the only entry points come from legitimate sources, yeah, sorry, stepping off on a total tangent, but you're 100% right.
yeah.
And my favorite ChatGPT, since you brought it into existence, meme that I've seen recently was the one where you have Fred and Velma from Scooby Doo, and they're pulling off the Chat GPT mask and says, "Oh look, it's actually Clippy," and it's anyways. So it's the actually Clippy one. It's good times, but I digress. But I think you bring up a valid point of verifiability and origin help fight disinformation. And
Big
I think
time.
that's a point that comes into play. Help. I won't say solves. I won't be as bold as to say that, but I would say that you could have more verifiability of origin of when the data that might encapsulate who put the data in there, things that help you even when you have a data set. And let's say you have ChatGPT and legitimate forum comments were brought in, but then later to proven to be incorrect, they could be removed. You could have
Mhm.
them unissued, right? To some extent, you could remove that. And I'm going out on a limb here from a tech perspective, but you could theoretically have a GPT instance that is only allowed to consume things that are verifiable. And if
Exactly.
they're pulled, that data set should be removed from its intrinsic decision engine on that next query. So, um, anyways, what a great comment. You sent us off on a little bit of a tangent there, Trujano. But yeah, keep commenting if you're here. We've got a little bit left to go through. Andrew Moon just dropped in and said, "I'm here. I'm just here to heckle Matt Lee." All right, Andrew, I may pull you in and make you describe what distributed or decentralized identities mean soon. It's good to see you, brother. I'm hoping you're having a fantastic year. You certainly deserve it. So, okay, back to the conversation about this. So, what does Credivera do today? Because the standard's a standard, and to your point, it's an argument between PhDs and graying beards for years. I work on the CSA Zero Trust exam, and documents that would take 10 minutes to write take 40 years to write because you end up getting into these arguments. But you guys jumped forward. You said, listen, we're going to dig into the existing infrastructure. We're going to build our own code. We're going to build the wallets. We're going to build the things. What are you guys doing as a company? Help me understand what your vision is in this next year or two as these protocols start to take off.
Um, so right now, Credivera, their history is in. I can answer the question before I get into it.
Okay.
Uh, so if I could issue a verified credential to myself, it would be the verified ability to smoke cigarettes and handle propane. Um,
That's awesome. This comes from a question from Elena. She says, "Michael, what is a credential you would issue if you could?" And I think it would be like the fire marshal bill issuance. Is
yeah,
that what that would be
exactly.
called?
Yeah, this is a dangerous technology for me and my family because We have never told the same story twice.
Whoa, and now you could
Once you
prove it
start verifying,
theoretically?
everybody on the East Coast is going to be furious with me for working on this, because now everything they say, none of it has been true for 100 years, and it's just going to get worse for them now that people can verify things. So yeah, I would definitely choose the most dangerous possible certification I could get, just for the hell of it. But to go
You know
back
what it'd be
to,
for me? I'm gonna answer this one.
okay.
Even though she pointed it at you, there is nothing that says I know what I'm doing to be an MSP. Nothing. There is nothing that says you're an MSP. I would love to see verifiable credentials that tie into having passed some just basic, be able to close the front freaking door and bathe yourself as a human level of existing, right? Like of being an MSP. And so I think as you start seeing things like CompTIA Trustmark or these other pieces, I'd love to see those become that badge and proof of an MSP's adherence to growing themselves and capabilities from a cybersecurity perspective. So, Lena, I know you didn't intend to set me off on that one, but you definitely hit that on the head. The other thing before you get going on this, and maybe we just pivot, but one nice thing about VCs is that different systems can decide what issues they trust, right?
So
Um,
this takes us back to what Credivero is doing. This actually brings us back on topic.
Sweet, it
Yeah,
happens. It doesn't
yeah,
do
yeah.
it by plan, but it happens.
So the idea that Credivero was founded on was, we call them verified credentials. So Credivera is working with all these different companies to make sure that the people they're employing and the people that are going on site actually have the certifications that they claim to have. And so Credivera would be employed by the company, and Credivera would go out and verify these credentials for the company, right? Which is a heck of a lot of legwork.
Yeah.
And it also involves, you have to be a Credivera customer, or we have to engage you in some way.
You've done some human to digital vetting and creation and approximation on that, right? Like you've gotten it tied to a real person that's able to issue that fire marshal bill credential, right? Of the propane
Absolutely.
cigarettes. The other thing we got some more clarity to from Trajano. This has been brilliant. Thank you for joining us. You can have an ultra open system that allows for complete anonymity, or a very closed system that only trusts sources from very specific things like driver's
Yeah.
license. You can also see this playing out like a doctor or a surgeon or someone that has to have gone to accredited medical school, has to have gone and gotten a license from the
Yeah.
AMA, has to have actually done a residency and had some stats in that. You could track surgical stats through these. You could do these things across jobs that then add to that identity from only trusted sources, right? From only Purdue University or this company. And so you start seeing a world where, God, what a brilliant person. Do you know Trajano? Is that somebody that's your friend too? Or
Oh yeah, he's with us at Credivera. It's Trajano.
ah, so
I
he. Oh, thanks for not correcting me.
I
Oh, that's funny.
It was a
Oh,
good
that's
way for me to make you both suffer. It was,
gosh, you're just so delicious in that. I appreciate you, brother. I get to totally nerd out. And Andrew Moon said this well, and he said, listen, that'd be awesome, Matt. That would definitely weed out the posers. I genuinely think we're heading towards that kind of density in the MSPs space in the next couple of years. I won't get on a stage this year without talking about Trustmark. Some of the things they're doing that aren't quite public yet, and the depth they're going into, is probably the first thing most MSPs have ever seen, driving them towards really understanding what it takes to support clients in a fiduciary capacity from a
it would
security
mean so
perspective.
much in the tech space. I mean, it can't go understated. I I I rail and rant constantly.
Me
Like,
too.
yeah, oh, constantly about, like, how did you not know this? I would love to be able to just be like, you know what? I'm going in the office. Hold up your phones. I'm going to scan your wallets, and then I'll know if I should rant at you or not.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
And you could see that issued from, think about it this way. Credly, for example, they have my CISSP, my CCSP, they have my CFR, my PNPT. Those are all in my Credly, but they're moment in time. If I
hmm,
stopped paying my dues at CompTIA, or I'm sorry, stopped paying my dues at ISC squared, and I didn't do my continuing education, that cert would be pulled, but my Credly would still have been valid,
yeah,
right? And yeah, go
and
ahead.
that's a great point. And to that point, it would still be valid. And really, it was never verifiable in the first place.
Right, right. It's kind of a here's a sticker,
Yeah.
right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that later I'm still satisfying those requirements. Same thing for a doctor, right? Same thing for an attorney. Same thing for some of these things that come into play around the continuing my education to actually continue to learn and move with the market as it continues to change.
Yeah.
Being able to prove that, or in more important cases, disprove that, and maybe disprove that in the sense of, let's say I was a doctor and I was under review and I wasn't allowed to work because of something like a morbidity and mortality review or something to that effect, then during that temporary time, you could prove they operated without a license, or you could
Yeah.
prove they, right? So you get into that as they step into the surgical suite and they go, click, patient, I'm doing this. And their EMR bolts into verifiability of this surgery actually happening. And you can get super creative with all the things that could be issued and the data sets that could be issued that live somewhat decentralized, right, in that way, and could follow an identity as they go. But yeah, this has been fantastic. Anybody in the audience that has any questions, we've got 5 more minutes. Would anybody like to ask Michael a question before we wrap up with this expert? I don't usually get nerded out too much, but having my first meeting with Michael, I've been a little fanboy around this a smidge. Any questions out there? Pop them into LinkedIn or my YouTube, and we'll get them. I'm looking at you, Henry Tim, or Mr. Moon, because you know I can ask a question. All right, if they pop up, we'll go to it. I think my last thing, if you, to Elena's question of like, if you could issue any verified credential, I'm going to ask it a little differently. If you as a company were trying to build mass, and I think that's what you have to do to make a system like this work, you have to get to enough density and problem cases and white papers and use cases that exist that you can create that. What do you think your biggest win would be? Well, good, we got a question, but what do you think your biggest win would be if you nailed a mass company, like something huge that would change and alter something, governments, or what would be the biggest win for you guys?
I mean, that is a huge question, but when I look at it, I simply say the biggest win for us would be something like I look at like in Canada. You look at Canada Post. The ability to track your package.
Ah.
Like you and the people in the United States, you're spoiled, right? You're spoiled. I got a notification from Canada Post the other day that said, your package is arriving soon. We'll have it to you within 1 to 11 days,
Holy hell.
right? Like 1 to 11, that's the window.
We're not sure, the horse could break down, we could have no
Yeah.
wood inspectors. Yeah,
If
exactly.
if we had VCs if we had VC stamps, I'd know you guys sat on this for like 20 days. Like
Right, we can see it didn't touch another scan gun for
yeah,
20 days, right? Yeah,
that'd
yeah.
that'd make that would change my life.
All right, last question and I'll dig into who LinkedIn user is in a minute, but how about the versatility afforded by VCs? Like access management, right? Like what is the versatility of that from an access management perspective? And I love this, right?
Yeah.
And when we think about it, we're talking about identity providerships where those identity providers might consume some of these things. So what do you think that does from a versatility perspective?
It blows it right out of the water. It's federating with VCs. Um, Federating with VCs is a bit of a game changer. Um, you can put, it depends on how you structure it. There's a million ways to structure it. It's very flexible. Um, but the VCs to track your luggage at the airport would be amazing.
It would, right?
Um,
Good call out, Derek.
but yeah, so federating with VCs though, I mean, you can go to an issuer, like you can go to Credivera and look at our DID. The DID is a public document,
Right.
and you can take that DID identifier and then on your end simply say, we trust this DID identifier. So now if I want to log into your system, all I have to do is produce the appropriate credential, scan it in, and I'm federated. It could even provision certain details into your system if you want.
Like a
Um,
version of skim provisioning, right? Where you're
yeah,
pulling these data points out of this document and
yeah,
using them to add context or group and what they should have access to or not have access to, or right,
yeah.
the
You could put
restrictions
those
on it.
all that right in the VC if you wanted. And the key to that is like something like schema.org.
Hmm.
I can't stress this enough. If you're gonna make VCs, follow a schema. Don't just make it up. And that way we can exchange it. Yeah, physical access,
Yeah.
especially on like Android devices where you have NFC available. you can
Well,
actually.
and take this as a let's talk about this actually. So one of the things CISA, I'm meeting with my buddy from CISA to talk about this further, but they just redefined 882 Rev 3 of OT, including access systems and all these other things that come into operational technology. And to the point, if I, one of their fears is those OT systems will be the next ransomware, right? In the sense
Mhm.
that ransomware today, you're seeing down and declining payments, you're seeing more effective backups and protections, you're seeing more. Well, those identities typically being tied have been abusive for Facebook, Twitter, and Uber. All three suffered access control issues from the attacks against their core identities. What if that identity was just the presence of this DID verifiable cred? There's not much to crack there. There's not
No,
much that you can take over there. It's either I has it or I don't has it, right? And that's kind of
and
the
it could
great
be
part about
revoked and
this.
reissued like that.
Yeah, you could roll them if you were concerned about an insider threat or someone leaving, and it would be outside the normal band of systems that are your identity systems, right? It's a decentralized identity that then could feed potentially your identity provider at Okta or your identity
Exactly.
provider at Microsoft and
And
those kind of
Trojano
things.
has a really interesting point too. Like you could use VCs for physical access as well. If I'm a contractor going on site, I get access to certain places. It could
But
be
I don't have
defined
to exist in someone's Active Directory environment, right? I'm only
exactly.
going to have a cred that's a pass that
Yeah.
allows me into the system. So we've run out of time. I really want to thank everybody for being here. This has been a fantastic conversation. Comment below if you want to hear more. We want to dig into it more. This is one of those topics I think over the next year is going to just blow up. I think there are so many applications of this, and there's a real force for privacy solves, security solves, integration of third party contractor solves, all of those things bundled into this conversation around verifiability of something and the ephemeral nature of things, right? I don't always need access to this building. I don't. Yeah. So
That'll be handled in our next podcast, the philosophy chat,
the philosophy chat.
the ephemeral nature of things.
That's fair. That's fair. It could certainly have applicability there. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to get back to wood inspecting. I appreciate everybody being here, and I'll talk to you later, Michael. Thank you.
Talk to you later.